Now that you've had an opportunity to really dig in and take a look at those family resources and kind of place them into two buckets, how you interact with your families as partners for general education students and all students, including every student in your class or in your school, and how that changes a little bit for our students with disabilities and IEPs. I'd like to make that a little bit more applicable. I'd like you to be thinking about what this looks like in your school and in your classrooms, but I also want you to be able to apply it directly, in which case we're going to step into a little bit different routine. We're going to look at a very short case study I've written about Jen. At this point in this lecture, if you have not read that case study, it's very short, it's 2 pages. If you have not read that, please stop and quickly pull that up and read that now. I believe it's in the required reading and materials folder for this week. Now that I know that you've read the case study about Jen, what I would like to do is kind of talk through the first 2 paragraphs of that situation with Jen. And it starts with Jen as a 4th grade student. And I want to think about these situations from a families as partners lens. And I want you to know that I wrote this case study very carefully. I also act as an advocate in schools at IEP team meetings and mediations, not so much in the state of Michigan, but also in other Midwest states. And all of these things that I'm describing really happened. Most of them in a single case. I've changed a lot of things so that I'm not violating any privacy, and I've exaggerated a few, but these do still happen. If you're reading this case and you think, why would that 4th grade teacher ever do that? It happened, and it does happen. And some of the things that put barriers in place for families to be partners are obvious, and some are very subtle. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this case with Jen. Jen is a 4th grade student. You'll notice that in the paragraphs I've highlighted things that specifically hone in on family partnerships. Her parents pursued outside testing, outside evaluation, which is part of their legal rights. And then in 2nd grade, she had a 504 plan. And then in 3rd grade, they had a full IEP team. Everyone was represented, and she has quite an entourage for a family. And she was found eligible for special education services in October of 2023. And that was in 3rd grade. So that's a year before kind of what we're talking about. In 3rd grade, I gave you quite a bit of details about her school and some of the places that things were falling apart a little bit. Jen receives services for special education and has ADHD, but she doesn't necessarily need a full-time special education person with her at all times. She needs a lot of supplemental aids and services and accommodations. And what starts to happen is that in 2 of her classes with Mr. G and Mrs. AC, they are gen ed teachers, no special ed staff in the room, and those accommodations that help her be successful and remove some of the barriers are not being either offered or put in place. And the parents reach out and they communicate directly with, this is the highlighted part of paragraph 2, communicate directly with those general education teachers, but it's not really filtering through. It's in fact filtering back to the special ed staff. So there's kind of a big miscommunication. Families reaching out to gen ed teachers and they're thinking, I don't know what they're thinking, but I'm assuming they're thinking special ed services are somewhere else, not maybe in my classroom. So she starts to be discouraged and have poor scores and exhibit some school avoidance behaviors. This is a major red flag. This is data, hard data with her scores, and also some soft data with her social emotional learning and her social skills. And she's starting to kind of hate school. They take a break over Christmas. We're in January of 2024. And things are still going really badly, and there are no accommodations offered in these 2 courses. So mom and dad have a meeting with the principal right before the break. And at the meeting, parents really are making a good case, and they say, this is what's happening. And they request that the principal make the 2 gen ed teachers, Mr. G and Mrs. AC, use her required accommodations. For whatever reason, the principal has a different solution and allows Jen to switch classes, which is outside of the school rules and requirements and what everybody else gets. This is another really major red flag. For whatever reason, the administration in the school, which are also part of the IEP team, decide not to enforce things with certain general education teachers and just make the whole situation better by having Jen switch classes and allowing her to be successful in another setting. Whether or not this is a great idea, it doesn't address the core of the problem, but everybody's happy at this. So I want you to think about these two major red flags in paragraph 2 and what it does to families as partners. When the general education teachers in this case don't communicate directly with the family about why or why not those accommodations are or are not appropriate for their classrooms, and the issue is never really solved, that is upstream work that I can guarantee you, once you flip the page or if you've already read, is going to cause problems downstream. In order to have family partnerships that work for students with IEPs and disabilities, we need to identify any red flags and deal with them. I'm not saying in this case that we go into Mr. G and Mr. AC and force them to use all accommodations and modifications. There might be a very good reason that's not happening in those classrooms, but then you reconvene the IEP team and you find out why, and you provide the supports either to the teachers or you amend the IEP or you provide different services. You come together as a team and collaborate upstream and find out why all of that is happening. The result could have been the same. We could still see Jen in January of 2024, the December before, switching classes, but we need to address that issue and find out what's going on. What I would like you to do from here, I want to make sure I tell you the exact things that are on the slide. What I would like you to do from here is keep reading. I want you to read paragraphs 3, 4, and 5 on the second page. I have not highlighted any red flags for family partnerships, but that's what I'd like you to do. Complete reading the case study on your own and think about the actions taken by the school or not taken by the school that either contribute or are a detriment to that family partnership and ultimately Jen's experience at school. This directly connects to journal prompt 9, in which I'm asking you to do the same thing, either documenting and using Jen's case study. You may absolutely do that. But I encourage you to think about families and family partnerships in your schools and in your experience with students with IEPs and disabilities. Hopefully, this is giving you another way to directly apply the legal requirements, concepts, and best practices that we're talking about building partnerships with families.